What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? You are listening to the Ruckus podcast in combination 102.9. I am your host, Cuban Mike. And normally, every once in a while, I try to bring awareness what goes on in Cuba. By now, maybe you haven't followed me by now. Every week, by the time it became a bad habit, every week or every couple of weeks, I try to bring a guest to the show, help us bring awareness to the community. And I made it a point to try to bring issue what goes on during the Black Cuban community, not to dismiss our white Cuban brothers, but our Cuban community has been the voice that's been silent. It's been the unheard on, and it's been ignored, and I think by now we've been told it's by design. And today, I have a guest, and I've been a fan of this man's work now for a couple of years now. I follow him since 2020. My mom told me about this man's work. I've been trying to hunt him down for like the last year and a half to see if we could do my podcast, but he has no social media. It's like became a ghost. And to the grace of the universe, I want to thank my sister Grace for making this happen, because I was like, I have to find this man and have him on my show because he has so much gems, so much advice, and it's like his brain is like so far from the norm, just from the work I've been watching him online and just from everything he does to the state of Florida. You could catch him. You do America TV, right? America TV. You've been a guest.
Yeah, and then my show Enfoque Ciudadano every night, Monday through Friday.
Yeah, the Monday through Fridays. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bring to you Professor Andres Alburquerque. How you doing, sir?
How you doing? Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, yes. Oh, the pleasure is all mine. As you can see, like usually when I come to the show, I usually wear my hat backwards and get very hip hop now, but I had to come with a blazer to show respect. So show respect to the show. I have to come like an adult now. And I got a haircut now, so I don't have to put my hat to the side.
Oh my God, that's good. That's a good thing.
but welcome. Please give us a brief introduction on yourself. Tell my audience from Massachusetts where you're originally from, which I know, but can you give us a brief intro?
Well, I was born in Havana, Cuba, which is what every Cuban, as you know, every Cuban says they were born in Havana, but they were not. And then when they say I was born in Havana, the question among the Cubans is which floor and qué piso, because everybody says. But anyway, I'm a Havana born, but a Cuban proud. I love the entire island. I happen to be a tour guide at a certain point in my life, so I know the island through and through, the keys around the island, and I've come to love that piece of land like I love my own life. So I was born to a mixed Cuban communist family, and when I say communist, I mean before Castro. Castro would be considered a neo-communist, but communists were in Cuba since the early 20th. I would say that right after the advent of the October Revolution and all of that, some migrants from Poland and other countries came to Cuba to settle. It was part of the offensive, especially launched by Stalin after Lenin's death. Not that Lenin was any better than Stalin, by the way, but I'm just being objective and honest here. So it was an offensive where they tried to create or to monitor revolutionary situations all over the country. Because some people say, oh, okay, so the communists, how could the communists know that Cuba would bring a Fidel Castro 50 years later? They didn't know. They sent their agents all over the place. Mexico City was full. It was effervescent with Russian spies. So when they saw that Cuba was the first one in, they just concentrated on it. But then again, Castro was not a communist at first. He is a son of not so wealthy as the American academician would put it, but the family was rich. They own a farm in Viran. That's why so many Cubans call Fidel Castro the hyena from Viran, La Hiena de Viran, because Viran is his native town. So my family was communist before Castro ever was. And it is important to point out that Black Cubans never, and I repeat that word, never, liked Castro's apocalyptic verbiage and rhetoric. That patria o muerte, homeland or death, Come on, man. Los negros cubanos, black Cubans were much more hedonistic than that. And I'm not labeling it race. I'm telling you what the conjuncture made of us. So the mixture between the Spanish, Latin, that is hedonism at its best, with the Africans that are not as bitter as we might think and are very happy people despite all the reversals and being against the wind so many times. That mixture brought about a people that was ready to fight, and we proved it in the independence war when we carried the burden of the war against Spain for independence, but also believed that there was something better at the end of the tunnel, that you didn't have to die, that the alternative was not death, that the alternative was happiness, that the alternative was pachanga, which is a Cuban word for, you know what, chilling out, being happy, enjoying, moving your hips and stuff, and taking it easy after a day's work. That is basically what the Cuban, the black Cubans, of course, there were many exceptions, were about. So it should come as no surprise that we didn't like Castro. So where do they basically gravitate around? Black Cubans gravitated mainly around the Communist Party. Yes, because they promise integration, racial equality, just like they're doing here in America now, by the way.
Mhm.
So we were lured into that, and we were lured into Batista, because Batista was mixed race. He was not black. He was mixed race with Cuban Aboriginal people, the Indios, as we call it, Indians. But anyway, he was mixed race and he paid the price for it. Batista could not enter the Havana Jack Club, even though he was a president. Keep
Wow.
that in mind. Keep that in
Wow.
mind. It's not that Batista had everything here. Actually, one of the reasons why Fidel was catapulted to power is because they wanted to get rid of that nigger. That's what they said. Cualquier cosa con tal de salir del negro. Anything as long as we get rid of that nigger. So the revolution since the outset was tainted by racism. Blacks were not in mass following Castro. It's not true. 2 or 3 followed and they were heroes. That's fine. But it's not the bulk of the black Cuban community. So when Castro takes power, my family, of course, just jumped at the chance. The orientation from Moscow was, we're going to get that guy. We're going to influence that guy. We're going to prep him up. We're going to catapult it to power. And most of his entourage and security, what you would call in America the Secret Service, was led and made by all communists. They were communists. People don't know that.
Wow.
So first and foremost, the Cuban Revolution was not as genuine and as Latin America as we think. Then my family, like I said, participated in all the revolutionary tasks, as I call it. I myself wanted to be a member of the Communist Party. I was never accepted into the Communist League because, which is the youth section of it, because they said that I have petty bourgeois vices and prejudices. God knows what that means.
Wow.
Probably because I like to have manicure, pedicure. I don't know.
Hey,
You're supposed to be
you like to be a distinguished gentleman.
yeah, you're supposed to be Spartan, austere. You're supposed to starve. You're supposed to be a communist. You're a non-person. You don't have any criteria. It's all what the party says, and you know how that goes. So even though I fervently wanted to be a communist, I always had criticism and what I call positive and constructive criticism towards all the vices that I thought the revolution had inherited, because the revolutions are made by people, by men, and we're full of specks and mistakes and shortcomings. And so I saw myself as a positive communist with an objective view until sooner or later there had to be a clash and I got purged. So I spent 4 years after I had been a tour guide, after I had been an interpreter of confidence for the government. I had translated for people like the widow of Salvador Allende, the former president of Chile. I was part of the translators when Jesse Jackson was in Cuba, when Robert Redford was in Cuba, when Mariel Hemingway was in Cuba, when several senators were there. I interpreted for George Wallace's daughter, Betty Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pretty much right there until I wasn't anymore. You never know what the turning point is, but it really hurt when I saw my friends being lambasted, being attacked, being bullied, simply because they wanted to leave the country during the Mariel boat lift and they wanted a better life. I still was a communist then, and all I said was, not everybody has to be as Spartan and austere as we all are. People have the right to feel weak, to show weakness, and look for what they think is going to be better. Instead of bullying them, we should keep their keys to the houses and say, whenever you feel like you want to come back to your country, this is your house. We're going to keep it for you. You're one of us. We don't hate you. You're not the enemy. Needless to say, that suggestion was welcomed by huge repression, and I almost had to retract myself about that. You know how things are.
Yeah.
So I left Cuba finally after 4 years in which I swept the streets, worked worked in the different community services like waste management and stuff like that. And I'm not ashamed of having to do that, but a person that comes from high up and goes so low in the chain of the Cuban society, that's not normal. You're supposed to improve, not to go backwards, and let alone because you think different, slightly different from the other. Then, of course, I had to leave Cuba 4 years. After 4 years of being a non-person, and I went to Europe. I went to Italy. I married for the second time with an Italian citizen. I started living in the area close to Venice. By the way, I lived next door to an American base in Vicenza. It was all coincidental. And I started living in the West. So my eyes opened further. And I realized that things were not as they told me in Cuba. And I started radicalizing. Actually, the first time that I was aware of the beauty of my race was when I went to the gym in Italy and I noticed that everybody was looking at me. In Cuba, even though I had very good friends, I have to make it a point here, and I'm sorry if I go a little bit off way, but the American public opinion should know that racism existed in Cuba way before Castro, of course, especially after Castro, but it was never like here. It was not institutional. You could not find char crosses in your backyard. You were not supposed to travel in the back of the bus. There were no restaurants and water fountains for blacks or whites. It was so subtle that it was worse to fight against it. Because when things are so subtle and you say there's racism here, the other one looks at you and says, "What the hell are you eating on my table, man? What racism are we talking about? This is not like America." Yes, it is. It is not. Definitely not.
Yeah.
But Black people took the burden and the brunt of the struggle for independence against Spain in the 19th century. And when everything was normalized, quote unquote, we were the ones that swept the streets. We were the ones that got the worst jobs, and the best jobs were for white people. So, nos dieron la mala. I mean, they ripped us off, no doubt. And when we tried to protest, they killed more than 3,000 blacks in La Guerra de los Negros, in the Black Cubans War of 1912. More than 3,000. Was that war a smart move or not? I have my doubts. But what I'm trying to say is we even tried to forcibly claim our rights, and we were butchered. So there was racism in Cuba. Again, not as obvious, not as evident, not as palpable as it was in America. It was not part of the laws. It was basically a way of life. It was basically intrinsic in the jokes, in the lore of the country, in the vernacular culture. It was something like that. Phrases like el negro si no la hace a la entrada, la hace a la salida. I mean, Black Cubans sooner or later mess it up. That's basically what it said. Tenía que ser negro. What can you expect? It had to be a black person. La mona, aunque se vista de seda, sigue siendo mona. The monkey, of course, they always compare us to monkeys, apes, and the likes. Monkey, even if dressed in silk, remains a monkey. I mean, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But again, it was not like in America. If you ask me, my personal experience, my best friends are white. And they have dispensed me a genuine, sincere friendship that was proved in all my worst moments. So if you ask me personally, but it's not about me, it's about an entire segment of the Cuban population. And that's what we have to talk about. So that's in a nutshell that. Then I started working in the travel industry again. I traveled, I lived in the Dominican Republic, in Mexico, traveled to Jamaica. So I could see other realities and other angles of the racial problem from different angles. In every country is different. And finally, I decided that it was time to come home. So I came to America. I'm already a citizen, and I again, I'm very active in the community from the perspective of the America that I love, the America that I want. I don't want to change America. I want to improve it. I'm happy to study the history. I'm happy to revisit history, but I hate to rewrite history because that is dishonest. So that's basically, in a nutshell, my bio, quote unquote.
One hell of introduction. One hell of introduction. And right now, I'm just learning so many things right now. Like I just recently listened to a podcast called The Dictators, and they have an episode basically on all the dictators. So now we're in the segment. They talked about Fidel, and they was talking about him in his like college years, and you mentioned that Cuba had a communist ideology before Castro, but I guess when he took over, it got pumped up even bigger because now they had somebody that thought like him. So from what I got from the podcast, it's like, okay, if he was able to do that, and he already know that Cuba has a very like as you said, a subtle racist, he could take that for his advantage to get rid of Batista. So that was very interesting that they had these things, but I guess what he did was able to get the youth, like, because usually people that have that kind of ideology with the socialist communist, they come from college and they come from, the have-nots. And it's very interesting because he was not a have-not. His family was very well off. He's very well off. If I recall, I think his dad took him to private schools and, got him with the bougie people. So he was kind of set up, but he used that. He kind of like separated himself from that and went after the have-nots and try to act like, hey, I'm one of you guys. I'm part of the people. Let me prove to you that I could be one of that. And at the end, we all saw what happened. But that's very, very interesting. And you just mentioned that the War of 1912, where I myself knew nothing about this. I guess I got to pick up a book or talk to my mom about that story because I knew nothing about that. But this is why I have you on the show, because today I'm going to get a professor teaching the students. So I'm all here for that. Greatly appreciate it. So what was the dynamic coming to the States? Because here's the reason I have to ask, because I went to the protest in Washington, and my mom told me this story. But then when I went to the protest in Washington, I came a lot of like Black Cubans, like elderly Cubans. And it was so funny because prior to me going there, one of the things that my mom's asking, like, okay, where's our people at? And it was I remember clear as day. It was a Sunday, and it was like the most Black Cubans I've seen since I lived in New Jersey. We were out there. And I came across a lot of people from different generations. And the one thing that my mom told me was Cuba, what they did to particularly Black neighborhoods was like the indoctrination. So when you hear a lot of people that don't understand us, they say, well, there's a lot of white Cubans that come to America, so there's not too many black Cubans, so they must love the system, or America's like racist, or they won't accept us, not knowing if you're Cuban, you automatically could come over here with the special law they gave us. So one of the things that they told us, they were like, look, I wanted to come, but the Cuban system like indoctrinated us so bad. And everybody told me the same thing. Every time they looked at America and they saw like the way the black Americans were being treated, they saw, the Ku Klux Klan, they saw the church bombings, they saw the fire hose when people were protesting. You can't sit in the back of the bus, the dogs going after the kids. So I guess from a distance, they're like, okay, why would I want to go there? I'll just deal with this oppression. And then if it gets really, really bad, I'll probably might consider it. And for years, that was the system that they could pump into our community. And my mom will tell you the story, and she told me the story, and I started laughing. When my mom came in during the Mariel Belt Ride, she was scared to go to certain neighborhoods because they thought it's going to be the fire hose, the fire. They still have that mentality like it was 1965. So luckily, we came across people that were helping us. Like, they haven't done it in years. Like, we've been progressive. And, like, this is the first time they've seen color TVs. So the Cubans that I met in Washington was like, I guess, frustrated because they so well helped us to just keep us in fear to not come over here. And they just kept us in a bottle. So when you came to the States, now that you travel all over the world, what was the dynamics that you had, being black in America as opposed to being black in Cuba?
I already knew that the racist fallacy was one of the tools that Castro used to lure black people and make them stay. I have to be very honest with you, and I always say this in my show. Much as I vindicate or try to vindicate our right to a fair deal, much as I denounce the racist state of things that existed in Cuba way before 1959, and especially after 1959, I must honestly say that even though we did not like Castro's apocalyptic approach, we were seduced, lured, infatuated by the rhetoric of, I have solved the problem. Now there's no racism. You can go into any social club and you will be welcome. So many of us chose to dress as milicianos, which is the popular militia, to call it somehow, and take over the properties of our white brethren. This must be admitted with courage. Otherwise, history will always be incomplete. Mind you, it was not a black movement of revenge. Mm-hmm. Castro manipulated us in such a way that we either fell on the trap, or some of us who had enough knowledge and culture let it go because the trap was easier than facing reality and fighting against it. So, wow. Yes, racism was the main thing for many years, up to 59, and especially beyond that. But there was a moment when we, the black Cubans, failed our white brethren and said, you know what? I'm going to be a miliciano. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be part of the process. A process that we didn't support since day one. We were sucked into it, and we let ourselves be sucked. Some people knowingly, some of us unknowingly, but we did. That is what caused, together with the standards of living, there was still racism in Cuba. So obviously, the highest standard of living was for the whites, whatever that may mean in Cuba. As you and I know, there's no whites in Cuba anyway. But
yeah, of course.
Let's conventionally call it white. Yeah. So the white had the privilege economically, even though there was a growing and pungent black middle class that had the control of all things vocational, like making furniture, plumbers, air conditioning. That was already something that we were getting into, and it was small private property. So the black people in Cuba were not starving. We're not in a ghetto. Some of us had our own thing, our own private property. Of course, it was not like the white Cubans. There was much to catch up with, but it was not as they constantly claim it was. It's not true. So we opted to stay. Of course, very few blacks came over in the first wave of migrants. So when the time came for Cubans to ask their relatives and pull their relatives out of there were very few blacks who could do that with their families. So we blacks remained in Cuba, and once again were the ones that took the brunt of the economic hardships and everything. I'm not saying that we deserved it because we dress as miliciano. I'm not going to get up to that point. I'm not going to get that far. I'm not going to say it's karma. That would be laughing about an entire segment of people. I guess it was basically ignorance. It was basically lack of civic knowledge, of civism, of awareness of what is best for your group, for your race segment, for your social class, whatever you want to call it, at a certain point. And we thought as individuals instead of thinking as black people. Have we given it a second thought, we would have said, we never liked this guy. Why do we have to stay under him? Let's get the hell out of here. And the situation would be different. Of course, after that, there were some other waves, and more black people got disillusioned and left the island in what a makeshift raft being
Whatever
claimed by people.
Car, they put the car of a boat.
Infecting in a third country, whatever it was. But it's a complex phenomenon. I mean, if you're going to talk about blacks in Cuba, it is so complex. Again, racism is so subtle that it's hard to tell the difference between yes and no, between guilty and not guilty. It is a complex phenomenon, and so many Cuban whites are scared shitless. I don't know if you can swear in this show. I'm sorry.
Fuck it. You can say whatever. It's my podcast. We can say shit. Fuck. Oh, wait till you hear the introduction. How the way I introduce my show when you hear the music. Oh.
Okay. So many
get comfortable.
Cubans are scared of facing the truth. And when you start doing a show about race and all, okay, we always talking about racism. Yeah, it is one of the issues, but there's so many issues. No. It is the issue, especially because if you live in America, you had a spring and a summer that was far from love. It was a spring and a summer when my color was used as cannon rodders to burn down properties of middle class and low income people, to burn down the country, and to deconstruct the American dream and turn it into an American nightmare. So yes, race is important, and we have to grab the initiative from the hands of the extreme left because it's damaging America. And you know what is especially damaging the black people? Because no matter how many people you see in Hollywood, no matter how many blacks you see rapping, if you go to Liberty City, Brownsville here in Miami, which are the black neighborhood, Jamal and Takisha's son still doesn't have internet, still has only a single parent, still is taken care by the grandmother who was a junkie back on the day and found God in the process, and now is regenerating, taking care of the grandson that is being educated without a father, or probably without a father and without a mother, and with an abortion clinic in the corner to remind us that we should remain in the 19% and no higher. So that is the truth.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that because when I live in Massachusetts, and they try to be as quote unquote progressive as they can. So I got caught up with the Black Lives Matter thing in the beginning because, just because of my experience living in America, I've been in bad situations with cops where they've been a little bit disrespectful over the case would be. So I got it. It wasn't until, this is why when I've been labeled as an activist, which is like whatever. But if you're gonna call me an activist, then I guess I'm gonna have to start in 2016. My activism started in 2016, right when Fidel Castro died, and I'm gonna tell you why. There was already weird things that Black Matter was doing that I was not liking, and I was already like ahead of the curve, but nobody was listening to me because it was like the angry man in the soapbox. It's like, look, these people are this, but they didn't like it. So it's one of those things when you admire something and you believe something, you find anything to do to defend it. So you see them do something bad, so they'll say something like, it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. Well, let's think about the good instead of the bad. Let's think of like, the upside instead of the downside. They'll do everything to like, realize that this organization is not for them. And by the time they realize it's not for them, it's already too late, because they already escaped with $90 million. They already got what they wanted, and they escaped with the plug. So it started with them, and then once I went to their website and they had like this big home homage to like Fidel Castro, and he was like a great ally to Black people and what it could be, I was already done. Unfortunately with us, it took us like 5 years later, once they did that quote, when they say what they did about the embargo and Castro and whatever the case may be. But I saw you in 2020, and you were probably like the first person that called it out. Like, I felt the same way, so you called it out the way I saw it. So what was the signs that you thought that this organization was full of shit, and you'd be like, you know what, you people should not support this? Maybe you could explain it better than I could, because when I did it, it was like one ear out the other.
First of all, the very name. The very name is divisive. The very name, Black Lives Matter. Okay, Martin Luther King, and mark my words, in 2 or 3 years, Martin Luther King statues and monuments will be put down. They cannot wait to take Dr. King away from the narrative, because it goes against everything that BLM practices and preaches. So they're just waiting for some kind of new hero to dethrone MLK. Mark my words, this is the first time in your shows you record this. So when it happens, you say, I said it.
Now, mind you, we're saying this on Black History Month, and it's President's Day. So if you're saying that and this happens to you, I'm going to save this and cut it. I swear to God, but save this and cut it, and make sure you were the first one that said it.
They don't like Dr. King. They play with the name because it's the only name they have that reaches across the aisle. But if you remember, Martin Luther King, Dr. King, was not for a revenge of Black people this or Black people that. What he wanted was coexistence, brotherhood, living together, everybody seated at the same table, rather than, no, Black Lives Matter. Stevie Wonder put it like no one else, and he was almost booed. He said, you can't say that Black Lives Matter and then you have the killing of Black on Blacks on Chicago and other cities. So the very name of the organization, it should have been more inclusive. Anyway, apart from that, the practices. If you're violent, if you burn down, have you heard of Black Lives Matter burning somebody's house in one of those zip codes, like Martha's Vineyard or any of the rich zip codes?
Of course not.
What did they burn? What did they destroy? Our own people's little business, our bodegas. So it is, like I said, Black Lives Matter is an organization quarterbacked by very white hands, financed by very green money, and aiming at very red objectives. There's nothing black in this equation. So I can't trust it. The language was so abrasive, was so violent. I mean, why do you have to burn anything if you want to make a point? Why don't you call on everybody to join hands? Remember, when Floyd was killed, and yes, he was a criminal, he was okay, but he shouldn't ever die like that. Not even Bin Laden should have been killed like that. So let's make two different points here. He's no hero, he's no martyr, but what they did to him was murder. And I hope they rot in prison or they get the electric chair, or whatever it is they can do.
Yeah.
But using George Floyd and having a mausoleum built with him when Jamil Shaw, the third straight A student of college, church, an American football star, was killed by an illegal immigrant 2 blocks away from his house. And he said, don't shoot. And this is how he died. Is no hero, no mausoleum for Jamil Shaw III, an example of an American citizen, actually the American dream, a Black youth taking full opportunity, taking full advantage of the potential that this country can offer to everyone. So he's not a hero and a thought who traded counterfeit money and who put a gun to somebody's womb, to a lady's womb, pregnant lady's womb, is a hero. Something's got to be rotten with these people. And then, of course, life proved me right when Patrice Couleur and the other one were caught red-handed buying wealthy mansions in affluent neighborhoods where white people live, away from the Black brethren they so much claim to be defending. Hypocritical. I knew since day one, nothing that tries to divide America is good. Dr. King died for trying to unite America. That is the way. Of course, things change, history evolved. Probably some of the teaching of Martin Luther King must be updated, adapted to this new conjuncture. I'm fine with that. But you can't run away from his basic teaching.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just revenge. And we don't, you know what happens when you embark in revenge? It's like a pendulum. It goes this way, and the farther that way it goes, the farther this way it will go. So don't be surprised, my brother, if 20 years from now, we are the scapegoat, we Black people are the scapegoat of this society because we contributed to an attempt to deface and destroy America. So my Black brothers have to say, no, wait. I'm going to choose what is convenient for me. What's in it for me? And when I say for me, I don't mean for you as an individual, but for me as a group, as an ethnic group, as a community. What is in it for me? How can I thrive much better? How can I improve? How can I get away from this inertia where kids grow fatherless when we don't take advantage of all the potentials that this country can offer? Why should I turn like Cuba or Venezuela or something if we know that it doesn't work and many of their people risk their life coming up here? So why should we go backward when we have to go forward? That is what the Black people of this community have to say. Criticize what has to be criticized. Police brutality, let's go march. I'll be the first to join you. Actually, when Floyd was assassinated, and he was assassinated, butchered like an animal, and that is not done to any human being, no matter how evil that human being it is. When he was assassinated by those crooked cops, everybody marched. At the first 5 days, white, Asian, gay, lesbian, everybody was indignant. Oh, but then comes a string left, and who do they choose? The Blacks. They didn't choose the Asians. They didn't choose the Jewish. They chose the Black, the most maneuverable and sensitive and easy to use as cannon fodder.
Because they play with their emotions.
They play with our emotions. We have to get away from that. We have to start being rational. Remember, those Black brothers that have made it in this country, and I can name you from Denzel Washington to Shaquille O'Neal, they use their brain. I don't care whether they're Democrats or Republicans. I don't care. At this point, I'm not talking about politics, but they use their brain. They say, what's in it for me, for my family, for my community? Do I choose to believe in God and do it openly? That's Denzel's view. And I admire him for that. Probably Shaq says, well, I'm into God, but not that much. I'm rather into going to school, improving. Every distinguished member of our community should follow and foster the path they think is best and influence the rest of the community with that. That is what we are for, to get a place at the table, not to kick the white guy out of the table, because that would only beget somebody trying to kick you out next time. And we're going to spend our lives kicking each other out of the table when there's enough space for everybody. And believe me, there's enough food and wine for everybody. So that's basically my grief with this organization. And that's why I never trusted it. I never will. And I will never trust anything that preaches division of Americans. Even Barack Obama, who is my ideological enemy, but yeah, he is. But I love this word. There's no white America, and I'm quoting him. There's no black America. There's no white America. There is the United States of America. Whatever happened to the teachings of the prodigal son? Whatever happened? Now they don't trust Barack Obama anymore, or Barack Obama has changed his thinking. Somebody has to explain this to me.
What 100%. And I will say this, from us, the Cuban community, even though I bring up, the racial disparity that we go through as a people, I think I always say this to my American friends, you guys should probably take notes from us, because even though we go to like this displease, the one thing that keeps us together, we have one common enemy, and that's communism.
That is correct.
We could put that to the side. You don't even have to like me, but if we could get along for those couple of hours to have this discussion to get rid of that system, we could probably build a friendship out of that. And then after we build that friendship out of that, it's going to be your call. You could not like me, you could like me, we could back to being enemies, but what keep us together as a flow, we have one current system. That's why every time I speak to a Cuban, I just met a Cuban person over the weekend, and the first thing I tell them once I found out from Cuba, what's your story? How'd you get over here? Because we know we didn't come over here for the American dream. We didn't come over here because we were fleeing the crime from the community. We left the system, or their parents left the system, or their parents' parents left the system. So every time we come over here, it's like a movie within itself. So I always make it a thing, like, what? We might not, we could, we as a people, we go through two things. We go through racism, and we go through racism with our opposition, with the system that we hate. So we got to combat those two things. But we could level it down for a second and be like, all right, let's get along and let's build on something. Let's build on some kind of relationship. I think that if America could do that, it could be like in a better place, in a real better place, which leads to my other thing. I've gotten flacked, when the 2020 came around and everything was it was overly intense. And, you have the riots, you have, the election year. Cubans were very loud when it comes to our political views, and we are known to vote a certain way. There's no secret, we vote Republican. Even with that, even when you have Cuban Republicans and Cuban Democrats, we could put that aside for at least 5 seconds and get along, because we have, again, a common enemy. Our issue is how we're going to get that enemy out of there. They got one way and the other team has another way. But it was so funny when that came out, like where I lived at, I became like the Cuban representative on like why we're not getting in line and voting like, the way the rest of Latin America does. Because I know we all voted for Trump, or we just vote Republican. There's no way to get around it. I tried to explain to them, but because they didn't understand our system, like I said, a lot of people left by choice. We didn't have a choice. They pretty much said, this is what it is, get out. So can you explain to my audience, what is it with Cubans that they always tend to vote like a certain way, and what led to that? Because I was trying to do some study of that, and there was a point where Cubans did vote for Democrat during the 60s and 70s, and things changed during the Reagan era. But can you explain to my audience, what is it that we lead to vote a certain way?
Yeah, well, I am convinced that the powers that be, I'm not saying Trump, Biden, Clinton, no. The powers that be, the real power, the establishment in the United States were decisive in putting Castro there. They wanted Batista out and they wanted Castro in. By the way, this 600 attempts on Castro's life, that's BS. Total BS. Yes, there were attempts to kill him, but not 600. Let me put it to you this way. When the powers that be in this country wanted to kill their own president, they killed him at 12 noon in front of everyone, and nothing happened. So if the powers that be really wanted Castro, Castro would be dead ages ago. Let us not sugarcoat or how do I say, adulterate or mystify the figure of the Cuban security and intelligence. Yes, they are effective. Yes, Castro took advantage of that, but there were not 600 attempts, and there was never, probably one or two were, but most of the attempts that took place were not even serious. Really, are you going to use the mafia and somebody at a cafeteria to put poison in the fridge? Come on, man. If you want to kill someone, you send a professional.
Okay, I don't want to laugh, but you mentioned how about when this country like killed their own. Like, I forgot, you had the Kennedy thing, you know, what he did in broad daylight on camera. And then I remember Lincoln when he was watching his play, his theater.
Yeah.
So they'll remind you, it's like, it's kind of like an arrogant, like, look what the fuck I did attitude. Like, look what the fuck I did. Don't make you think you're not special. We'll take you out also.
Yeah, we take you out. If you go against it, and then, yeah. But anyway, Cubans got here. Kennedy had done the Bay of Pigs. He betrayed us in the end, but there was rumor that Bobby Kennedy wanted to kill Castro. So, of course, they tended to be Democrat. Johnson had approved the Cuban Adjustment Act. So there was some certain Cuban Adjustment Act, by the way, for those who don't know, is it's not even a law, but it's a precept, a legal precept that gives a certain edge to Cuban citizens beyond and way beyond some other citizens from other countries. So it's like a privilege. And out of gratefulness, many of us Cubans decided that, okay, let's vote for Johnson. But like you said, Nixon first, then Reagan, we started to vote Republican. And also the tone and the rhetoric vis-a-vis the Cuban junta was much more aggressive from the Republican side than from the Democrat side, even though, in all honesty, none of them want to do anything. It's all BS. They're playing with the feelings, they're playing with the sentiments, and Cubans have to learn to do their things on their own and not wait and ask for permission from anyone, because it's not going to happen. So then this position of being, remember Jimmy Carter, very soft on Cuba, very soft. Then Obama, Clinton, and the planes that were put down, brothers to the rescue, and he gave no order to protect them. So we feel even more betrayed by the Democrats than we feel by the Republicans.
Can we throw? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before I forget, can we also throw the whole Elian Gonzalez incident also too?
Elian Gonzalez, Elian Gonzalez, that was a child who got here. The mother was with him. His father knew all along they were coming to America, and the deal was that they were going to claim him later on when everything was legal. Then it all happened. Everybody died but Elian, who was a little child, who was a symbol of the grace of God, because he got here. He was the only one alive. And the Cuban government, Castro, with his usual shrewdness, discovered that that was a topic that would earn him some points with the public opinion. So he launched a campaign to recover Elian. And of course, legally, the father, who evidently was pressured by the government, had the right to claim his son. Nobody denies that. We were thinking of other considerations, and we wanted the American government to see the entire issue into perspective. But Clinton on the eve of Good Friday, by the way, of all days, ordered the marshals and the FBI to rush the place where the Leannes was being kept with his family, took the boy away, put him on a plane. The father was already here. So it was like a conspiracy, Clinton's conspiracy against the Cuban community. And we can't forget that. We can't forgive that. Yeah, both parties are hypocrites, but the Democrats get too far. You only need to know a fifth of the Democratic Congress people are against a resolution against Cuba. And 80, almost half of the Democratic Congress people are against a declaration against socialism. That is alarming. That is alarming. And I'm not talking about AOC and the usual squad, the magpies, as I call them, las urracas. It's not, no. It's not the usual gang. We're talking about 80 people here. 80. So, of course, we Cubans are scared of a Democratic president. Actually, we're seeing now Biden pampering Castro, giving them all they want in exchange for nothing.
Nothing.
And it's worrying. Of course, we are legitimately, we are concerned. So that is the basic reason why we vote Republican instead of Democrat. And then you get to people like me that are, as much as I was a communist back in the day, I'm an anti-communist now. It's a philosophical inclination. I am ideologically convinced of the evil of communism, socialism, whatever the hell you want to call it, and the shortcomings and the intrinsic vices of the market economy, but it can be improved. At least you and I can talk here and say what we feel. Still, I don't know about tomorrow. Still, but you can't do that in communism, and you can't eat in communism, and you can't have a car, and you can't travel freely. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It is a no-brainer. America cannot go backward. You can't turn America into a Soviet Union. It has to go upward. Yes, there's so many things that must improve here. But I don't see the recipes from the left. What I see from the left is turning this into a concentration camp. And I don't agree with that. So that's why basically Cubans vote for Republican.
Yeah, I'll say this. My mother will say it loud and proud and with no shame. And it's so funny because we were like bumping heads when it came to politics, because my whole family, they were all Democrats. They were all Democrats. They voted for Obama. They thought he was gonna like kick ass and he was gonna like put Cuba in his place. So then once she saw what happened and found out that he lifted certain things, the dry foot, wet foot, going to Cuba, playing the baseball games, he wouldn't speak to like the political prisoners, people, the activists, people that trying to reach some change, and he suffered what it was. And then in the end, we also had the Cuban government played him. There's no way to get around it. They played him for a fool, and they pretty much told him to his face, our system is gonna remain of what it is. And he basically told him, you're not gonna do nothing to change it. And then the only thing that he said to try to like save face was like, you know what? The freedom is in Cuban people's hands. And that's the only thing he could say to like save himself from like, doing that shitty deal. But after that thing was done, my whole family left the party. I was like the only one left. I'm still the only one left that's still in that lonely boat. And things might change. Things might probably change this year. Thanks that I live in a country where, I could go left, I could go right, I could go independent. I don't even have to vote at all. I could just pay my taxes and keep it moving, make sure the IRS doesn't knock on my door. That's the beauty of living in this country. And the one thing I got from my mom and everybody, that comes from Cuba was like, you don't want our problems, especially on the poverty level. You don't want our problems on the poverty level, and you don't want our problems on the political level. So I'm very thankful, and my parents left and they haven't came back. We're talking now like 40 years now, 40 plus years in counting. And I thank them for giving me that kind of integrity and that kind of discipline. That we're not leaving there till things change. And if I have to die not seeing my island, which crushes me, That's from her own mouth and from my parents' mouth. If I have to die, and I can't see my family, so be it. So I'm definitely am for fighting that good fight, and I'm also just very in tune this time around, because over the years as things have gone really low, and I've been bringing awareness, one of the things that people have told me is like, we don't know what's going on there because we're not on, there's no way to get around it. Cuba is not in the world's radar except if you're in Florida. We're not in nobody's radar. So somebody in Michigan won't know what's going on unless I tell them. Somebody in middle America, Idaho, Montana, we don't know. So I'm glad I'm able to use this platform, and you have your platform, and we got this thing called social media and the internet. We could tell people every day, this is what's going on, this is the deal, and this is what we need to do with change. And just like, if I see somebody in the street and I give them change, we need help. We need allies. We need people to help us bring awareness, and we need people to help us to get rid of that nasty regime that's been destroying us. And for the record, and I need you to press forward on this, because one of the things that people they get loose talking points. So they all think it's the embargo, and it's not the embargo, it's the regime. Yeah. It is the regime. One more time, it's the regime. And, maybe you could tell my audience a little bit better the things that you can do and do. I know for a fact, as much that we restrict things, they do allow medicine and they do allow food. And I think we're responsible for at least 68% of the food that comes to Cuba.
It's American. Yeah. Foodstuffs, medical equipment, and meds are allowed into the island. The only thing is that they have to pay cash because they don't pay anyone. Actually, people should be aware that there's a trial at this moment in London where some creditors of the junta want their money, a debt that is 20 years old, and they don't pay. So they get money, but they put it in their personal coffers, just like the swindlers in BLM. It's the same race. That's why one supports the other. And then again, I remind all your viewers that Venezuela does not have an embargo, and the economy of that country is in shambles. The Soviet Union was never embargoed, and the damn thing collapsed. China was in shambles until, yes, a communist government, but capitalist relations of production and ownership on the basic means of production. So it's a kind of a mixture. Nobody that remains communist has any well-being in the country. Cuba could be a prosperous nation even with the embargo, because the embargo is from, but they don't pay anyone, so nobody sells them anything. What they want from the States is not the merchandise, it's not the goodies, it's not the product, it's credit. That's what they're looking for, to rip us off so that you, taxpayer American, subsidize their little wars in Africa, their advantage, and their corruption, because their family lives like kings and queens.
Wearing $50,000 purses. Yeah. And to piggyback on what you said, even though China got this weird communist capitalist thing, they're still going through like a level of oppression that few people even speak upon. I mean, they're so scared that the few people from the NBA that spoke on it, I know you remember from the there was an incident with a basketball owner from Houston. He spoke on free China in Tibet, and they stopped showing all of the basketball games in China just because he spoke against it. And China don't really care. And because unfortunately, us as a country, we're money hungry horse, we just say, I'm sorry. And he didn't apologize to just recently, because it was really destroying the pocket, and the NBA gave him pressure. But before that, he stuck to his guns. And I wouldn't be surprised if Yao Ming, because he played for Houston, probably told him like this is what's going on, and he probably just on his defense said, free China. So there's also a level of oppression that is underhanded that they don't speak about. So
and it happens in China and Vietnam and in every other country. But it seems when you hear Lloron James, Lloron in Spanish mean a whiner, somebody who's a whiner. So Lloron James, instead of LeBron James, always keeps saying that American cops wake up every morning trying to find a black person to kill, which is very irresponsible and very anti-American, and has nothing to do with the need to fight police brutality, the need to improve the police forces training, and the need to improve this country through and through every day, which I agree 100%. But LeBron keeps silent and has a lot of business in China where they exploit people. They use slave labor, and he keeps silent and he avoids the question. That is what Lloron James does. So he is not a dignified member of the community. He chooses soft enemies, enemies that he can criticize. Of course, you can criticize Donald Trump. He is the boogeyman. Of course, let's criticize Donald Trump. But what about Xi Jinping, who, by the way, is the president of China? What about exploitation in China, where he, LeBron James, has a lot of business? So he's not that impeccable a person. He watches his wallet first.
And they all do, because they remind me of I don't know if you keep up with basketball but Steph Curry, he signed a petition to make sure they don't have like no affordable housing around his little rich area. So I get like a group of people that signed for it, and he was one of the ones that signed that he didn't want the and he wouldn't know it because he was born rich. His dad was a basketball player, so he grew up very upper level things. So he doesn't want those kind of people within his neighborhood, even though he is on the mic, he's preached something else. So it tells you again that a lot of these entertainments, they're full of it.
Yeah, that's
really,
correct.
Really full of it. Same characters, you know, different movie. So, but yes, what's up next for Andres Alburquerque? Where can we find you?
Well, my main broadcast is in Spanish. I know that some of your followers, or many of them, should speak both languages, and probably others. Yeah. America is improving also in that subject. So it's called Enfoque Ciudadano, which is Citizens Approach, and is every weeknight from 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time, and it's basically with a host, and we cover subjects from reality in Cuba to reality in the States, international issues, the Middle East, the works. We cover pretty much everything. And then there's two other sections that I do, which are the relevant issues, where I comment on different news, and Thinking Out Loud, Pensando en Voz Alta, where I reflect on certain issues and certain news that I already commented, but was very superficial, and I want to go deep into it. I want to focus on it. And people make comments and send letters, and that's basically what happened. I'm thinking of networking with you, with Grecia, and doing something in English too. I think it's necessary to do the crossover. I even have the name for the show and everything, but let's keep it quiet.
You said nothing. I heard nothing. I heard nothing.
I believe the Cuban American community, and especially the Black Cubans, are the perfect conduit to liaise between Cubans and the African American community on the one hand, and Cubans and the American public opinion at large. We should not limit ourselves to one group. That would be racist. Mm-hmm. But of course, we have to realize that a lot of effort has to be devoted to the Black Americans, because the manipulation and the half-truth and the fallacies have been too many. And it's important that they realize that basically the Cuban junta, as I call it, is a racist entity. I'll tell you, and probably some of your audience know, that in 1983, the Grenadian government, Grenada, a tiny island in the Caribbean, was overthrown. And then there was an American invasion, but the government had been overthrown from within. And the comment that I heard among the Department of the Americas of the Communist Party of Cuba, Departamento de América del Partido Comunista de Cuba, the ones that led the policy, Fidel's policy towards Latin America, and of course the Caribbean and the United States and Canada. I heard this comment uttered by a Black Cuban speaking about Grenadians. As you know, Grenadians are 95% Black.
Yeah.
And he said, estos negros son tan brutos que no son capaces ni de defender una revolución. These niggers are so stupid that they're not even able to defend the revolution. That's what they think of you. You're going to keep believing in them and say that, no, the Cuban junta, yeah, they have their problems and excesses, but it's America's fault. It's always America's fault.
It's America's fault. It's always
America's fault.
Wow. Now, before I forget, I had on my notes here, but I had two more questions before I forget, get out of here. One, we have people like yourself. I got to thank my sister Gracia because she's just been relentless. If you follow her on social media, she's been like relentless when it comes to speaking on this topic. And you know, she gives me the energy to make sure that my sister, you're not alone. I got you on this one. Like if you need the shooter, I'll be the shooter for you. I got you on this. One of the things that we've also been asking, like, what is it with, like, they've been asking me, and since you live in Florida, what is it with Black Cubans in Miami and Florida? They're not exact. I mean, I know I see them, but for whatever reason, I don't see them like as active as yourself, you know, bringing more awareness to the situation. I mean, I don't see them on social media, or I don't see them on a YouTube channel. Usually when they're doing stuff on YouTube, it's like fun and games and being comedians, they're dancing. There is like I hate to say the word minstrel show, but that's what I kind of see when it comes to us. And they're not so serious on bringing awareness. So what is it with our community down there that I see them, but they're not as vocal as they should be?
Okay, as I told you before, the universe of Black Cubans in exile is not as huge as that one of white, whatever a white Cuban could be. As white Cubans, it's not. We are just a small segment, number one. So of course, the chances of getting somebody who's vocal are much slimmer. Number one. Number two, I perceive a certain disillusion among Black Cubans, among Black Cuban Americans, and allow me to elaborate in this. Except for a few ones, I would say that 85% of the Black Cubans who live in the States arrived later, not in the first two waves. So they were not part of that initial enthusiasm, that combativeness, that fervor against the Castro regime. So many of them were permeated by the junta's propaganda. And even if they are against it, they were starving, they know they live better here. So many of them lack the philosophical inclination and the political liturgy that would fuel a constant, stable, and sturdy position against the junta. They oppose the junta. They probably don't see the point in making that a reason for living, of making that their everyday duty. It is hard to explain, even for me, but there is some component of disillusion. They are sick and tired of politics in general. So many of the people coming from Cuba don't want to hear about politics. They say all politicians are corrupt, which is true, and I agree with it. But I don't care. Even if I don't trust any of them, any. Even the ones I vote for, I don't trust them. I vote like this. Look at.
Yep.
And I put the ballot there. But there are some politicians that are less far from me than others. So we have to start somewhere, and we can use them to influence the other or get rid of the others and inch a little further into our objectives. Not all Black Cubans see it that way for reasons that are perfectly understandable. And believe me, there's still racism in the media. If you see Telemundo, Univision, which is the other one, Televisa, I call them Puerco Mundo, Unavisión, y Televisio. That's the way I call them. You see their soap operas, everybody's white.
Yeah.
So where do they have the black people? Cutting the grass in the lawn, serving as porters, menial works. They speak about racism, but they're the most racist people. So
or slaves, or we were slaves.
They use us as slaves. So where are the black Cuban peoples going to be present? They don't have an outlet. They don't have a voice. Even in those means that are not that racist and welcome black people, you see probably 3, 4 white people, black people, including me, and you don't see any other one. So there's a combination of, it is a compounding of lack of presence, lack of representation for objective reasons. We got here later. Many of us are sick and tired of politics. We get the feeling, we hate the junta, but we don't want to be verbal about it. Because we believe there is no use, that nothing will change. And this is permeating a lot of white Cubans, by the way. And then we have the exclusion on the part of the media because they're inherently racist. So that could explain it. Some other people may have another explanation. Don't take my word for it.
No, not at all. I'm just speaking the opinion because I know we're out here, but it's like, I know you're there, but for whatever reason, we're not as vocal as we should be. I mean, I'm seeing it from a distance. We don't see it. So, and my final question, just to end in a proper note, what do you think? It's hard asking for like this country's help because I know this country doesn't help unless it benefits themselves. But as either with this country or even us as a people, what would you think? You know, what would it take to actually see a free Cuba once and for all? Because before I was on the fence, like, you know, let's let's use our phone as a weapon. Let's protest that. Let's sing. I was very kumbaya with it. But the older I get, I treat it like voting. You know how you say you just vote like this? I have a saying right now. My saying, because when I was younger, I was very naive with politics, thinking that these guys are going to save us and they're going to make the world a better place. And once you find out they're just out for themselves, my saying right now, I vote to keep the fuckery to a minimum. That's it. I vote for you and give me a headache and keep the fuckery to the minimum. So now the older I've gotten into like the extreme view that, yo, if Cuba needs to be free, we need some sort of military intervention. That's where I'm at right now.
Not necessarily.
No.
Actually, the system as it was has collapsed. That is not what it used to be. I jokingly, I tell everybody, the regime already fell. They have forgotten to send us the email. They never send us the email.
We missed the memo. It's
like 2 boxes, Rocky Balboa and another one. Stunt fighter fighting. You have him also. He's already knocked out, but he's holding on your shoulders. If you step back a couple of steps, the damn thing will collapse to the ring. That is the way the regime is ready to concede once and again, is weak as it never was. It could still last some more years like that. But the powers that be in America and in Europe, which is very important too, the EU, will never come to the rescue unless we make them realize they have no choice if they want a place in the future of Cuba. We have to get away from getting grants and help from the American government and the European government, because they give you $20 and tell me, don't believe in that Mr. Reyes, he's a CIA agent. Then they give me $20, don't believe in that Albuquerque because they play with us because they don't want to have to deal with us. They feel much better dealing with the junta than dealing with separate organizations. Why? Inherent weakness for power, laziness, cowardice. I don't know. It's probably a mixture of all of the above. Power calls power. Power recognizes power. They don't recognize the people unless the situation becomes so volatile that they're fearful of losing a foothold in the situation. So unless we get to that point, and we might be getting closer, we see more and more Cuban women, Cuban mothers, especially Black women, showing their face on the phone and saying, this country sucks. This is a dictatorship. We never saw that before. Up to 5 years ago, that was inconceivable.
All we had was the damas en banco, in birthday. That's all we had. That's all we had.
Women are starting to be the lead. Actually, I would dare say that they have surpassed the opposition leaders. They have surpassed the men. They have surpassed everybody who had a role or a reputation as a fighter for Cuban independence or for Cuban freedom. And they have become the guardians of our integrity. How long is that going to last? How long would the junta tolerate it? I don't think they have a choice. Are they going to arrest every woman? I don't think they have a choice. So we may see a change tomorrow. We may have to wait 5, even more years for a change. I don't know. But believe me, it is not what it used to be. It has changed already drastically. The regime broke and burned the contract it had with its people. The contract was, you pretend to work and I pretend to pay you. It doesn't work anymore. Everybody is a free-for-all. Get what you can. I'm not going to give you anything. The hell with my promises. This is the far West. It's worse than any Western society because it has all the weaknesses of communism and all the weaknesses of a fearful, savage capitalist society.
Ooh, I mean, mic drop. I mean, this is the perfect way I could end this show, man. Professor Alburquerque, thank you. This has been an honor and a privilege. The universe does work in mysterious ways. You know, I didn't think I could get in contact with him, but I was optimistic more than ever. I'm like, I'm going to get this guy one way or another. And the universe and the 6 degrees of separation. I got to thank my connect. And it's a pleasure. Hopefully I'll have you get on the show and we could give me more gems on this.
Anytime.
Give me till April because there's going to be Women's Month coming up. So I got to talk to all these women coming up. So I got to make sure I keep them happy. I keep them happy before they strangle me. So give me up till the end of March, and I will definitely have you on the show. Hell, I mean, if I could pull some strings, I would love you to have a speaking engagement here in Massachusetts. We could have to make it happen. And again, thank you. And I believe I'll be doing your show coming up on Thursday.
You are next Thursday. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm gonna
before we part, as they say, actually, this coming Thursday 23rd.
Yeah, I'm gonna be there with my perfect English, so I can't wait till that Cuban audience comes after me. Este tipo dice español está todo jodido.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's gonna be. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna give you English, Spanish, and Spanglish. I'm gonna give you 3 languages in one night. So we're gonna learn a couple of things here. But yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Ruckus Podcast in combination with 102.9. I am your man, Cuban Mike. Once again, thank you, Andres Alburquerque. Thank you for lending your voice. Thank you for your fight and your activism and just bringing the words to the community. And I'm feeling more optimistic more than ever. We will see a free Cuba, and that dictator will fall. Guys, you can catch me every Wednesday and every Friday I'll catch y'all next time. Same tape deck time, same tape deck channel, and I'll see y'all on Wednesday with this episode. Love y'all and take care. Peace. Let's see.